Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Marc Givler. Got Chip Minnich with me here as always. Our schedule breakdowns for the Big Ten teams continue. We are Iowa Hawkeyes. And Chip, this is a program that even in down years, it feels like they really make you beat them. Like this isn't a team that, you go into and you generally, gives you a game or you go in there, even if you're a much more talented team and you win a game 35-7, they make you feel them for 60 minutes. And they're going to have to do that again this year. I think they've got a pretty tough schedule, particularly in the Big Ten Conference. They lose Caleb Johnson at running back. They have some other options, of course. They've went to the portal a little bit to hopefully improve their offense. We know they're going to play great defense. They've got some really good players coming back on that side of the ball. But, Chip, as we look here at the schedule, let's take a look here. What jumps out to you about the schedule first and foremost? Anything that kind of catches you there?
It's difficult. It really is. I mean, let's ignore for those of you that are viewing this, the non-conference game, the non-conference schedule includes their typical game against Iowa State, and we'll talk about that momentarily. That's at Ames. So their non-conference schedule, has its challenges. And yeah, I mean, they get, some games that might be all right, that they'll be the favorite. But when you look at it, like they go on the road, to Wisconsin, that's not an easy place to play. They have to bring in teams on the home slate, in three, their three consecutive games in mid-October to the beginning of November. They have Penn State, Minnesota. They have a bye week, and then Oregon. That's a tough schedule. I mean, then they go back on the road to USC. So finishing up at Nebraska on Black Friday, November 28th. So it's going to be a challenging year. I think Iowa fans should be ready for the fact that, yeah, you're going to probably be going to a bowl game, but it might not be a prestigious bowl game. Put it that way.
Yeah, so I'll run down the schedule again for those who are listening to this on audio, so it's not super annoying for them to try to keep up. Sorry for the video, folks, but just let me get through this here real quick, and then we'll kind of get into it. Iowa starts with a home game against Albany. Then they are at Iowa State, home against UMass, at Rutgers, home against Indiana, bye week, at Wisconsin, home Penn State, home Minnesota, bye week, home Oregon, at USC, home Michigan State, at Nebraska. We just talked about, we're running these in order, so we're not, you guys can actually go back and look at this. I'm not spilling anything that hasn't been released yet. We're going to run these in order, but we just talked about Michigan in our last one and how Michigan kind of got a good draw by, Chip and I are kind of in agreement that the bottom tier of the Big Ten this year is three teams. It's Maryland, it's Northwestern, it's Purdue. You can put them in any order you want, but that's kind of the basement tier of the Big Ten this year, or so we think. And Michigan got all three of those teams on their schedule, and all three of them actually in a row with a bye week mixed in there. Iowa, on the other hand, doesn't get any of those teams. I look at the schedule and okay, I'm not predicting them to go 0-9 in the Big Ten. Let's get this out of the way. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is all 9 of their Big Ten games, they have to show up. If they play like garbage in any of their 9 Big Ten games, they will lose to that team. There are no layups. There are no gimmies. At Rutgers coming out of the chute might be okay, but you better play. I mean, you better show up. That's another physical team there. None of these games are gimmies. So your only real gimmies are Albany and UMass. And gosh, I mean, that's one heck of a schedule, I think. I just, at Iowa State, who is tracking to be, a top 15 type of team this year, maybe. And then you got, an Indiana team is probably going to be ranked. Penn State, obviously one of the best teams in the country. Oregon, one of the best teams in the country. The cross country to USC, even, at Nebraska in November is not going to be a picnic. And, so maybe, when Michigan State at home is like your relaxation game, which you can't, but if Michigan State at home is like your easiest conference game. To me, that's saying something. What did Iowa do to anger the Big Ten?
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked in a previous episode about Wisconsin, because I think that they certainly have the most difficult, but this, just at a glance, this is a very tough schedule. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. I think Iowa State and Iowa, it's a rivalry game. It's a non-conference game, so it doesn't impact Iowa in the Big Ten, but the fact that, okay, you want to, if you can, you want to win all of your non-conference games. I'm not suggesting that they can't. I think that it's very I mean, Iowa State beat Iowa last year on the last play of the game by 1 point. So those games, I mean, it's pretty much like throw out the record books. As you said, Mark, I think Iowa State is certainly projected to be one of the better teams. So I'm going to say, if Iowa can be 2-1 going into Big Ten play, that's, probably about as good as you could possibly hope for. I'm not saying that, that it's beyond the realm of possibility of being 3-0, but yeah, like you have to bring your A game when you go to play Rutgers, because that's no longer a pushover team. Michigan State at the end, which you alluded to, it's in Kinnick, but Michigan State's improving. And then as you talked about, like the home games that Iowa has, the fact that they're going to be playing they're going to be playing Penn State, they're going to be playing Oregon, Minnesota. I mean, it's a tough schedule. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to be one of these things where Kirk Ferentz, let's not forget the fact that, okay, it's not as though like Iowa has been this tremendous offensive juggernaut over the years. And all right, they're putting all of their eggs in the basket of Marc Gronowski, who didn't play in the spring. And that's not meant to say that I think Marc Gronowski at quarterback is an upgrade, but who knows if that goes south, what are you going to do and who are you going to turn to? So it's, as you already referenced the fact that, Caleb Johnson, that, he's off to the NFL. This should be a challenging year for Kirk Ferentz. I think I completely agree with what you said earlier. Always tough, when you're gonna have to play the full 60 minutes. But this is going to be a challenging year for Kirk Ferentz and his coaching staff.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't dislike the team they have coming back. I like the Gronowski pickup, as you mentioned. Not having him in spring kind of stinks because, it's just more time with the offense to build chem. Like there's a lot of things that hurts, but it's not that I'm sitting here like, oh boy, the cupboard's completely empty and the roster's not any good. And like, I like a good portion of their roster. I just hate the schedule. I mean, this schedule's terrible. Like at Iowa State, they always seem to, that's always a field goal at the end.
Yes.
Someone either makes it or misses it. And Iowa's lost that game when it probably should have won it, more than Iowa fans would like to rehash here. But, that's going to be tough out of the gates. At Wisconsin before you have to play Penn State. I mean, now they are somewhat, I won't say lucky, but they have a lot of the better teams they'll play in the Big Ten are at home. They get Oregon at home, they get Minnesota at home, they get Penn State at home, Indiana at home. But even the ones they do have on the road, those are tough, like Wisconsin, Nebraska, USC. Those are not fun road trips. In Wisconsin and Nebraska's case, they're super loud, intimidating environments. In USC's case, it's a cross-country flight where you're working out the time difference and everything else. And so it's not a very generous schedule. They're going to have to, they're just going to have to out physical teams, win with defense, win a lot of 21-20, 17-14. They're just going to have to do this the old school Iowa way. And I just think there's enough teams on that schedule where it's like, Penn State and Oregon are not going to be intimidated by a physical game. Penn State and Oregon like to play physical football. I mean, that's going to, so I just, there's some matchups here I don't love. Boy, this is interesting. Chip, best case, worst case. What do you think?
Wow. Okay. This is it's a tough call. I'm going to say right now that this is still a bowl team. So that kind of, by my definition, okay, that means like 6 wins. I guess like if I had to guess, like I would say that, all right, that means winning all 3 of the non-conference, going on the road to Rutgers, beating Wisconsin, and then, let's just say like Michigan State, but then, some of those home games, I think it would be fair to say they'll probably be underdogs to Penn State, Oregon. It wouldn't surprise me if they're an underdog to Minnesota, but that, again, that's always a grudge match between those 2 teams. So I'm going to say worst case scenario, 6 wins. Best case, man, is this tough. This is so tough. I would say if they really go on a roll, and by that I mean winning all 3 of their non-conference, and then let's say that they beat Rutgers and Indiana in September, and they go on the road after the bye week to Wisconsin, because as I mentioned a few moments ago, the Wisconsin has a really tough schedule. Okay, I still say, that they're going to be underdogs to Penn State and Oregon. I'm going to say probably like this, the ceiling for this team is probably at 9 wins. And I apologize, Iowa fans, if that, if that seems too low, but I just don't see, based on just the lack of offensive firepower that I think college football fans have kind of grown accustomed to at Iowa, again, good running game, but, not really any kind of a passing game that really terrifies you. I mentioned earlier about Marc like the pickup, but okay, let's hope that, he's well acclimated to the offense. Yeah, I'm going to say best case scenario is 9 wins.
I think this is going to be my widest range. So I'm with you on best case scenario. I think 9-3 is the best I can see them doing here. That essentially means, they start 5-1, then they like split the next 4 against Penn State, Minnesota, Oregon, and at USC. Whether it's beating Minnesota and USC and then losing to Oregon and Penn State like they probably should, or whether it's, maybe they steal one against Penn State or Oregon at home, but then, lose out in LA or something, and then come back and, they could win the last 2. They could beat Michigan State and Nebraska at the end of the season. So that's kind of my best case scenario for them. My worst case scenario is like 4-8. They could lose to Iowa State, beat Albany, beat UMass, beat Rutgers. That's 3 wins. Lose at Camp Randall, or kind of go 1-2 in the Wisconsin, Michigan State, Nebraska, games where they kind of lose the road games, beat Michigan State at home. Like I don't think they're going to go 4-8. I think probably somewhere well in between that. That's why I haven't looked at a team with this wide of a range. That's like the whole gauntlet. They're 4-8, 9. That is like the Atlantic Ocean wide of the range I'm giving them.
Right. I mean, the quick point that I was going to make is like, when you look at this schedule, like I said, I mean, there are just no gimmies really. No. I mean, that the point I was going to make is like looking at this schedule, and I had to just confirm this. Iowa lost to Michigan State last year. Yes. Now granted, the game this year is in Kinnick. So I'm going to give Iowa the benefit of the doubt there, but by no means do I think Michigan State is going to be a pushover. I just think that Michigan State is going to be one of these teams that, I don't want to take up time about Iowa talking about Michigan State, but I think that the Spartans are going to be a much better team than I think a lot of people anticipate. So my point being is that to your 4-8, that could factor in there. Michigan State could certainly factor in as being one of these teams that, kind of puts a loss on Iowa that people maybe weren't anticipating.
Right. There's just so many games they have to show up for. 10 of them. They have 10 games on their schedule they have to show up for. If they don't show up, they will lose that game.
Yes. Easily.
So just a really tough schedule in a year that maybe beat will maybe be a bit of a transition year for them. I don't know, but like, yeah, they did not get the benefit of the doubt here. So any parting thoughts? I was like 4-8. Are you joking? Get off my screen. Again, I think probably something around 6-6, 7-5 is probably going to be where they ultimately fall into, which I still is not going to be very great for Iowa fans. But I just see a vast array of possibilities when I look at that schedule.
Right. I guess like the point I've often tried to make, and I say this in a complimentary way, and I'm not sure if people perceive it as that, but I really do believe within this expanded Big Ten, there are certain, we already talked about the fact that Iowa is missing the three teams that you and I perceive to be kind of like on the bottom or the basement tier. Right. What I was going to say is what I say this in a complimentary is that with the expanded Big Ten, I think there are certain programs that are kind of developmental programs, developmental teams. Iowa is one of those years. This might be one of the, a true developmental year for Iowa. And what I mean by that is, you've got a brand new quarterback in the sense, like into your system, you're replacing a lot of talent at key positions. Yes, you're going to be fundamentally sound, but you may not have the horses to keep pace with some of the teams on your schedule. So it might not be a prestigious bowl game, but I kind of look at this. This is an opportunity for Kirk Ferentz to truly kind of like relish the opportunity. Like, hey, I can use this as an opportunity to build for 2026 with some of the guys that we have brought into the program and that we've recruited into the program, and we'll come back bigger, stronger, tougher next year. That might be what Iowa fans may have to hang their hat on in 2025.
Yeah, I agree. And again, just to go back to like the Michigan episode we just recorded, it was the last one we posted. If they had Michigan's schedule, my floor would be like 7-5.
Yeah.
So this has much more to do. Again, I don't hate this Iowa roster. There are things about it I like,
right?
But the schedules are night and day between those two. I think those two are similar teams this year.
Iowa, that's a really good point. Very good point.
But one is playing all three of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and the other one's playing 0 of them. Mm-hmm. So, it's just the schedule here is really the difference for me between Iowa and your Michigans and your Minnesota's, Wisconsin's another one we talked about. Like in a vacuum, do I think Wisconsin's as bad as I predict them to be? Probably not, but their schedule doesn't allow me to really go nuts about their upside. So that's kind of where I'm at with Iowa this year. And hopefully for them, the schedule's a little kinder next year. But if they can get through this thing at like 8-4, they're gonna be that's a heck of a season. I think. I know maybe Iowa fans are gonna roll their eyes at that, but like if they get through that schedule 8-4, God help whoever they play in a bowl game.
Right.
Like they'll get matched up with the team that they'll probably smoke. But
exactly.
So we'll see. Good luck to Iowa. Lots of respect for that program, just the way they develop and just the success they've had over the years without having, they've got to go a long way for a lot of their talent. They don't get to just kind of create a 200-mile radius around their campus and like something like an Ohio State could do, or a USC, or something like that. So, or a Penn State. So, they've really they've been one of the teams I think that over the years has really maximized their resources and their development and everything else. So we'll see. And that's why I gave them the range, like the 9-3, like I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that like they can play their brand of football against some of these teams. They can get the surprising upsets in Kinnick. They have the toughness and defense to go on the road and win those weird games at Camp Randall where it's raining and miserable and everything else. So so we'll see. I'm giving them. No other school that we're going to do I have a range like this. So
right.
We'll see what happens. But thanks everyone for watching and listening. We'll be back with another one here soon. Again, thank you all for your support. And I think what we got Indiana next. So stay tuned for Indiana.